Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Can I ask the Governance Officer to confirm any apologies, please?
We have apologies just from Councillor Mohsin Hussain, but Councillor Tate is substituting for it. Okay.
Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Has anybody got anything they wish to declare before we start? Thank you. Agenda item 3 is items for exemption. We've got 2 items on the agenda today for exemption. The first one is agenda item 8, appendix 1, which is the Data Protection Officer report. And actually that's in the packets listed as agenda item 8. I think it's actually agenda item 9. Yeah. And that's appendix 1. And then the second one is detailed in the pack as agenda item 9, but that is actually agenda item 10. So I think there's just been a slight mix-up with the numbers there. And that's Risk Management Report, Appendix 9. So members are asked to consider whether to accept the officer's recommendation that these 2 items are dealt with in a private session. Can members confirm if they're happy with that recommendation? Yeah, can we record that we will consider those as... Yes.
Chair, just for clarity, could we ask for a show of hands so that can be recorded by the clerk, just so that it's confirmed that we've passed that gateway.
And can we have a show of hands on that, please?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item 4, minutes of the last meeting held 25th of July. Any comments or amendments required to the minutes? Yep, Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Not an amendment as such, but I noticed on page 4 of the minutes reference to a couple of workshops that presumably will be taken forward and planned before the next meeting, one on audit planning and one on assurance mapping.
Yes, there will be. I think that also relates to the fact that we were going to record actions and started sharing those with the committee. Hasn't quite worked out for this committee, but that will happen after this committee. So once we've had this meeting, the actions will be circulated outside of the committee as soon as they're complete, and then we'll bring those back to the following meeting. So we'll start to get in a rhythm with all the actions, so we're tracking them. Okay, any other comments, or can members show that they accept the minutes as a true and accurate reflection? Yeah, do you want a show of hands again, please? Yeah. Okay, thank you, if we can record that. So moving on to agenda item 5. This is an item I asked to come to the committee, having had a discussion with Councillor Anderson about a review that the Scrutiny Committee held on the school's travel policy. So Councillor Anderson chairs the committee, and I wanted to speak to him about the outcomes of this work, and I felt that the outcomes flagged matters of relevance to this committee. So I noted concerns around meeting management, and it led me to reflect on GNA's role in assuring the flow of governance works, and bigger questions about how we ensure we've got visibility of all the related documents that we need for this committee to be able to decide whether governance is working as it should be or not. So I asked Councillor Anderson to come to this committee and just talk to us about this piece of work, and then I think it's important the committee has a chance to reflect on what this means in terms of the work of this committee and any actions that we maybe need to take away in order to improve how we get that visibility that we need for our work. So Councillor Anderson, would you like to speak to us? And thank you for attending, by the way.
Not at all. Right, thanks very much, Chair. This came about because there was a call in about some transport related matters. We released the decision, so we don't have to get in the niceties of that. But what came out of that was whether or not all the I's had been dotted and the T's crossed, and who actually made the decision at the end of the day, and was there enough of an audit trail to show what challenges there had been. And this culminated just before that at the actual CA meeting itself, when the paper was brought forward there wasn't a great deal of discussion or debate about it. When we asked what discussions had taken place at Transport Committee had discussed it under a larger document. There was a paragraph in about it. So had it been brought to people's attention so that they could make a comment on it? No. So as a result of that, we came forward with a number of recommendations which are on page 14 of them. And in terms of the recommendations that were there, just to give you an update, recommendation 1 is in progress and being led by our scrutiny officer, Khaled. Recommendations 2 to 5 are part of a general governance review. Items 6 to 9 will be part of a report template and a guidance review. In terms of, I personally felt that a number of these points had relevance to G&A, and I wanted your views, your thoughts as to what we can do about them. So I'd like, not necessarily today, your thoughts on it, but also would like to invite 3 or 4 of you to join the working group that I'm setting up so that we can have a look at, because at the end of the day, where we were coming from is we've got a whole raft of new things coming through devolution, and is the Combined Authority ready to take on these responsibilities, or if not, why not, and what can we do to put in place? Under the current chair, the G&A committee has moved on leaps and bounds in the last 12 to 18 months, and we want to continue that progress to make West Yorkshire Combined Authority the exemplar on the way that things should be done. We want to try and improve that, and so that the mayor, when she's out there, she can talk about how good we all are, and we join in part of the success. The one that we've not got any progress yet is on item 10, which needs the mayor herself to decide. Is she going to have something called commissioners? One of the new proposals that's in the government agenda are bringing forward commissioners, and basically someone like Alison Lowe, deputy mayors who would have responsibility. Now, is she going to appoint those, or is she going to keep the leaders of council effectively in portfolio positions? That's a decision for her to make. And also, when it came to the specific one on the transport, when we had the call-in, we had the deputy chair from the Transport Committee who specialises in bus-related issues, and he was absolutely fantastic in terms of explaining what the logic behind the decision was, what his involvement had been privately in it, and explaining why it hadn't gone through the full Transport Committee, and that led us to question. Now, he was and we would also have suggested that when it came to the Combined Authority, it should have been him that came to present the paper, because then people could have asked questions. And the other thing as well is that, as a rather argumentative councillor, I like to ask political questions, and in some cases I've seen in Wyca where it's officers that are being asked to answer political questions, and I think there should be a politician there to give a politician's explanation as to why they've chosen route A as opposed to route B. We might not agree with the solution, but at least we've got a logic behind what we're trying to do. So in summary, what I'd like, if possible, is that you reflect on these, pass back some comments to them, and 3 or 4 of you volunteer to join the working group I'm being set up with. And Nikki, to my right, she is undertaken to take responsibility and control for getting a report written up as quickly as possible, so that we can present things with a view to when the new West Yorkshire year starts next June, that these things are all in place.
Thank you, Councillor. I think Bron will testify that one of the things that keeps me awake at night about this committee is I don't want this committee to hear that governance has failed at that point. It's all, to me, it has to be about prevention. And I think this report does indicate a number of weaknesses in terms of governance. So it's about, reporting, it's about decision making, it's about scrutiny at officer level in committees. So there's quite a large number of challenges. So I think, if we can get some members represented on that working group, it would be extremely valuable to the work of this committee. I think, Nat, do you want to pick up on that?
I just wanted to add an addendum to Councillor Anderson's point that actually the Mayor was at scrutiny this morning answering questions. So on the point of political comments and on officers' roles as well in relation to projects and schemes, we've already seen that play out this morning. So these recommendations are being implemented where appropriate, and that was a really good session in looking at particular schemes and scrutinising those to provide assurance really to those members that are on the scrutiny board. So they're already underway, and we hope that we can report back on it in a fuller picture.
Thank you. Councillor Gordon, did you want...
Yes, thank you. I was going to put myself forward, Chair, if that's all right. I've been lucky enough to be involved in combined authority board decision making, and also on Leeds City Council I am a chair of a scrutiny board, and one of the difficulties in the developing devolution decision making environment is where the responsibility of the constituent authority ends and the combined authority begins, and vice versa, particularly when a lot of the decision making is delivered in what is called pipeline decision making, where permission is given for a project to be pursued, but the points at which it gets reviewed, it's very opaque as to who is responsible for that review, and what information should be gathered in terms of engaging with stakeholders to ensure that what was intended at the very beginning is being delivered towards the end. And I think I would take great interest in that and be able to offer a certain perspective from my role within Leeds as a local authority.
Thank you, that'd be very welcome. Yes, Ben, do you want to...
Councillor Baker's before me.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. So I think it's wider than scrutiny in that my perception is that there are issues across the combined authority about who is responsible for decisions, and that opaqueness sometimes, and so there's frustration on committees, never mind on scrutiny, about who exactly was making this decision, and there is frustration by members of the constituent authorities about who is making decisions within the authority. So I think it's all of that needs resolution, because unless you have resolution of that, you're going to have breeding dissatisfaction all the time. And I would just say that there does need to be, I think, a balance between the information that the politically accountable person gets and when they get it, and the information that scrutiny gets and when they get it. And I always feel slightly uncomfortable at the idea that scrutiny would get before the politically accountable person gets it. But one of the problems I think the authority has is that it's trying to do so many things so fast that it's actually really difficult to get the information to people in a timely fashion. So when you're trying to telescope both the politically accountable people and the scrutiny and the committees, it all just gets squeezed out. So I think it's really important to try to get it right, but I also think it's going to be really challenging to get it right.
Thank you. Ben, and then Councillor Homewood.
So really helpful conversation. I think, as Councillor Anderson has indicated, the combined authority and officers are accepting of and welcome the recommendations. I think the points that Councillor Dacre has made are absolutely spot on. There's a lot going on, and we're trying to ensure that there is the right amount of transparency and the right person knows the right information at the right time, and that's always a challenge in a fast-moving environment. I guess I would say that from an officer perspective, the delegations and the combined authority constitution makes it pretty clear who should be deciding what at what point. And I think the interesting thing about the scrutiny's investigation into the school bus decision-making process was from my read of it, Councillor Anderson, was enough time given for public debate about the issues from a committee that knows that it wouldn't be the final decision-making body, but has got the time and space to have that conversation in advance of the combined authority then making the final decision. And I think there's a lot in that. So really welcome the fact that this has been discussed. Agree that it has implications across the organisation and across committees and for governance and audit. The substantive point I wanted to make is that I think it is actually slightly more complicated in that when Councillor Anderson talked about doing a governance review, we are doing that in part because of the work we're doing with central government for something called the integrated settlement, which is in effect an updating of the way that central government provides funding to the combined authority. That gives us a greater level of discretion, not full, but a greater level of discretion to be able to move funding between funding pots, and requires not only us to think about actually how does the combined authorities processes need to flex to accommodate that, how does it fit with the cycle of meetings, business planning, etc., but also how what does that mean for the current committee structure and the way that things should run. So we're wrapping all of that up together. There are really only 3 combined authority meetings between now and the end of the municipal year, so that creates a real pressure in order to do the work that Councillor Anderson has talked about, be able to have that in draft to discuss and debate it before taking it to the combined authority for agreement before we're timed out. So there's a real pressure to move quickly. So really welcome members and others stepping up to take part in this work. I guess my plea is we need to do so in a really timely manner in order to meet the deadlines that we're set. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Homer, did you want to come in?
It was just to say, the only thing that I thought when I was reading this report was when we got to the recommendations, I wasn't certain sort of who was responsible for those recommendations and how they'd be delivered, which I think you've kind of covered a little bit more of now. But I was just thinking of, from a governance perspective, when there are actions to take, how do we measure those and know that they've been followed through on? Because I think that will help us assure ourselves. And I think that is a bit of a challenge sometimes with scrutiny, because some of it is about culture. So if we're talking about pre-scrutiny, is the attitude in the organisation, this is a good thing to get more understanding of issues, to get feedback, or is it something that you have to get through to get a decision made? And I think that there's a certain cultural element which is probably hard for us to exactly track in that sense. That's where obviously yourself, councillor, would come in terms of maybe coming to this committee and updating us and us being part of that as well. But I think my only thing would be, is there anything we can build in where we can sort of track and be clear on who's owning things, how they're being delivered? Because obviously we can all want to have a really good scrutiny process, but how do we evidence that it's actually working that way?
Thank you. I think that's something I would support in terms of the tracking. I think that's a good idea. Thank you. Rob, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, I thought this was a really good example of scrutiny and audit committees and that relationship being understood and working, highlighting governance issues for us to consider. I was going to mention the action plan as well, and obviously having that being tracked, and say if Councillor Anderson comes back. I was interested about the governance review, and Ben, you've obviously explained that a bit more. If there's a governance review, where does the governance and audit committee sit in helping it be right first time? Because the last thing anybody wants to do is something to come after the event, and then the governance and audit committee say, oh, you should have done it differently, or what about this? Of how we play into that. Now that might be yourself, Debbie, or other members representing the committee, but also looking down the room to Bronwyn as head of internal audit, as I would expect to be part of that governance review process to help shape it sort of right first time. But given that sounds like a fairly chunky piece of work to do in a fairly short order, of how that interface with this committee would work, so that we were getting sort of almost real-time assurances about its development and obviously potentially to feed into it.
Ben, did you want to come back on that?
Yes. but only to pass the buck to Nikki. So Nikki's leading this piece of work for us. She's developing its terms of reference and the kind of consultation and engagement strategy for. Actually, I need to be very careful on my language there. I mean engagement. That's a big. But I don't see any reason, Nikki, why we can't share that plan with GNA members as soon as we have it.
No, that's absolutely right. We really do recognise the value that sort of the engagement around this review would bring to the process, but equally we've got a very tight timescale to deliver this, so we're going to have to think a little bit more strategically and outside of the box in delivering that. But we will be making sure that those checks and balances and engagement are undertaken at the right time, whilst keeping our eye on the target that we've got, which is outside of our control. It's been set by government as well, so there are some competing pressures here.
Rob?
Thanks, Nikki. Obviously, whatever we can fit into that timescale, I'm sure we'll collectively do our best. I suppose the other challenge is pace versus scrutiny, and just whether the whole arrangement allows, with the pace that things need to happen, whether there actually is time for scrutiny, and how in the governance review that gets factored in, that of how scrutiny can be preserved as a very important part and discipline of governance that doesn't almost get, or use the word, sort of, disregarded just because the pace at which something has to go through the process. And I suppose from my committee's, this committee's perspective, is assurances that that space for scrutiny is always preserved and can be effective even in very high-paced situations.
Thanks, Ben.
Just can absolutely give you that assurance, because most of our decisions involve the expenditure of public money, and we're not going to do that in a way that would breach any of the protocols that we operate when doing so. And I think it's fair to say that Councillor Anderson's the proposals in the report are about how we enhance scrutiny to make it more efficient and effective by bringing it in earlier into the process. Now that raises the issues that Councillor Dacre has raised, because everybody wants to know everything first. But how we do that is going to be the trick of the review. But please make no mistake, the intention here is to make sure that proper scrutiny is built into all of these, and we should never be using pace as an excuse for not allowing scrutiny.
Thank you. I think my observation would be, if some things need doing outside of committee, I think that needs looking at as well, how that would work, because that would help the pace, wouldn't it? We can't afford to wait for the next 3 months to start to look at things. So so if we could see, I think it'd be helpful for this committee to see the terms of reference, definitely, before we go. But I think we were aware that this work was in the planning, because Bron's mentioned it to us before, haven't you, in terms of the review. So it's just making sure that we're kept abreast of it, as Rob said, and making sure it's progressing in a timely manner and being involved at the right point, so that we end up with the right governance structure for both us and for scrutiny. Okay, any other comments on that? No? Okay, I would suggest that if we reflect on it, and if people do have any thoughts on it before the next meeting, do come back to me, myself, or one of the officers, and we'll make sure that those are fed in, because it is a very important piece of work, and we need to make sure it's right. Okay, thank you, and thank you, Councillor, for joining us and going through the paper. Okay, so that moves us on to agenda item 6, and that's a standard agenda item for members to receive the update on the internal audit plan for 25-26, and also members are asked to provide feedback on the new report format. So if we can firstly concentrate on considering the content of the report. Once we've done that, we'll discuss the format of it. So, Bron, did you want to highlight any key points? One for me I'd quite like you to expand on was point 3.4, because I wasn't entirely clear on what that was trying to say.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, happy to do that. I am going to take the report as read, so I'm going to move into questions as quickly as possible, because I think you probably all have things you do want to raise, and I want to give ample time for that. But just before we kick off, Chair, you mentioned at the start of the meeting a number of actions that came out of the last meeting. One of those, and Rob's already mentioned, the training sessions. I wanted to just confirm that we are down to do the 3rd of December session. It's an internal audit session. What I'd like to cover, subject to the committee being comfortable with that, is that we bring you our new IA strategy. The process that we went through to do the self-assessment against the new global audit standards, and to give the committee a chance to understand what those changes are, where they may impact on things, and to give some confidence to the committee that we've already built that into our new ways of working. You'll see a little bit of it reflected in the reporting arrangements, etc. I wanted to come back to the data analytics that we shared back in April, just to give you an update on where we are with that. And then about, sort of the audit planning, how we actually go through that process each year, because we'll be building up to starting that again in December, January time, to make sure that the committee understand the process and can add value by suggesting some other things that we might want to consider as part of that. And I wanted to sneak another item on there about managing resources and looking at the ways in which we can make the audit function as efficient and productive as possible. And I know there's a lot of valuable experience and knowledge around the table that I'm hoping people will come to that as a proper workshop session, with the idea of helping us to think about what we might do in that space. So I'm just throwing that out there at the beginning so you can muse on it and have a think. And if you want to let me know whether that is an acceptable agenda for that workshop, we'll plan it up in accordance with what I've just said. Chair, you said 3.4, timely completion of audits and impact on resource. That's a little bit of what we want to explore in that workshop. How can we do this better? What kind of thing? We can talk you through the process we're going through at the moment about looking at that, what we want to change, what we might want to do differently. And I think the recommendation follow-up we're going to pick up in the item 7 agenda. So, that is an opportunity, I think, that workshop, not just for us to tell you what we're doing, but for you to actually give a bit of challenge and some thought around what we could do differently. Was there anything specific in relation to 3.4, Chair? Okay, that's great. In which case, we put in here, this is a new report style. We really do want to know what you think of it. We thought it was really jazzy, but then we're auditors. I mean, it had a bit of colour, that makes it jazzy for us. So it was really, does this tell you what you need to know? We are trying to build in more and more analysis and feedback on what we think this is actually telling us, but it's a starter for 10, because obviously we want to know what you want to know so that we can give you that information so you can challenge around that more effectively. So I am really, really keen to get feedback, and not averse to having it outside of the meeting if anyone wants to chat it through, if you've got some really specific thoughts. So can I take it as read in terms of the report itself and just invite questions? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mem. Any questions from members on this? Rob, I think, did you have some?
It was just really, thanks Chair, about the workshop. In my diary it's an hour, which sounds quite ambitious to do what you've just described justice, so whether that might need to be looked at perhaps.
There is going to be a follow-up workshop in the new year, but that is designed to really focus on assurance mapping. So I'm hoping some of these might be quick agenda items. I'm happy to tag an extra half hour on for those who feel really invested in helping us to improve. And I was also going to suggest that because the team will be in the building, if anybody wanted to meet in person, we can do a joint hybrid session, both online and in person, and you can meet the team.
Thanks. Councillor Homewood.
Yeah, can I just clarify on that workshop, because maybe it's just me, but that seemed, I think members understand, knowing who members of the audit team are and seeing what they do is interesting, but I find it a bit unusual to ask members of the audit committee to give an opinion on how audit should be taking place. I'm not quite sure I agree that is that what you meant, or have I misinterpreted that?
So really it's more about how we report, how we present to you. Are you getting the information that you want? If you've got ideas about what we could do differently to make that easier and better, we're really on board with taking suggestions and improvements. We're led by the global audit standards in terms of how we audit, so that's pretty prescribed. We wouldn't really expect the committee to be trying to tell us how to do the audit. But I think there's always learning to be had from others around the table, and I'm very conscious there is a lot of experience around this table. So it is an opportunity, I think, to do that, you know, in a much more workshop style fashion rather than just a show and tell.
Thanks. Could I just ask one question on the actual report itself? It was just, it's quite specific, but I just wanted to understand how it works, because on one of the audits, or the one that relates to brownfield housing, there were some actions. I mean, it's a reasonable finding, but there were some actions which were then not accepted. And what I was unsure on is that, I mean, I know it's probably minor in the scheme of things, but the one that it referred to around programme risk effectively documented, so it sort of said they're effectively documented and tracked, but they don't have a register, which I was thinking felt a little bit contradictory, like, is that not the same thing? But also what I was thinking is that whilst I understand things might be risk accepted, that seems a strange thing to me to risk accept. So if internal audit says we should have proper risk management and a risk register, I would expect that to happen. I would expect something to be risk accepted whereby we're taking a, you know, more risky approach to some sort of activity where we're, do you know what I mean? I just found it a bit of an unusual thing to accept as a risk, but I don't know if there's any more specific details on that.
We found that a little bit unusual too, and we did flag in the final report that we issued that we weren't retracting the recommendation. We still think it is the right thing to do, but management have confirmed that they wanted to stick with just a programme risk register rather than risk registers for individual projects. So there's not no risk management there. It is just, from our point of view, for individual projects to be flagging risks surely informs what the programme overall is doing. And it was a matter of the team were balancing whether they felt they had the resource to do that or not. So we have flagged it in the final report that it is a recommendation that remains as far as we're concerned, but that management are accepting that there is a risk there that the programme register may not capture all of the risks, and it's up to them to accept that or not. We did say that we thought that would be a source of concern for the committee, so we did highlight that actually we thought that would warrant some conversation. I don't know if there's anybody from management here to answer to that, but it is one that we can call somebody in to talk through.
Thanks, Bron. That would be helpful if you could for the next meeting. Yeah, thank you. Dave.
Thank you. Yeah, a similar point on that particular audit, but just an overall point on the internal audit reports again, and I think I've answered this a couple of times now. Seeing just a short summary paragraph on the report itself is really not sufficient, particularly where we've got a really quite poor internal audit report in 23, and then that big question, I think, over the management's reaction to that in 34. So I think we need, I believe there's ongoing progress with this, getting access to the full reports themselves to answer many of those questions before we get into the committee. Having said that, I think those two, the really poor report for payroll and processing compliance and the brownfield housing, I would certainly like to hear from the executive in some way today as to what the situation was in payroll and processing, how it got to that point, how it's allowed to continue in that manner, and what the actions are being taken and how much urgency there is for that. So if there's somebody from the executive who can respond to that here today, that would be ideal.
Thank you. Is there an officer who can respond to that? Yep. Kate.
Thank you, Chair. So the payroll report, as makes clear in the detailed report, actually quite a lot of this we moved to a new system as part of the ERP. Through there were a number of teething issues that came through that in there. So it refers to a number of the controls that are in there. This is, I guess, a little bit around, we have spent some time making sure that the system we were able to pay people, and now we need to step back and make sure that we've built those controls in. Some of those are wider controls around the system controls, so we're working with the systems team around that, but also around redocumenting the new processes. Now we have a better understanding of how those work. A majority of the actions were due for completion at the, well, in fact, next week at the end of this month, and are on track to be completed by the end of this month. So we are well in terms of taking those actions through and taking those in a timely manner as agreed with internal audit.
Thanks. Did you want to come back on that, Dave?
Yeah, thank you for that. It's a little bit concerning that, I mean, some of the really basic controls in here haven't been put in place by the looks of it in terms of that implementation of a new system. Is there any sort of review that's gone on about how you implement systems like that that's going to change actions going forward regarding generally system implementation rather than specifically payroll?
Kate, can you come back on that again? Or not?
So certainly we have done a number of lessons learned around that current system integration. You're absolutely right. The payroll system was part of our wider ERP implementation. We are still doing some of that work, but we have done kind of in-flight lessons learned reviews that are now informing that further work that we are doing and going forward.
Thank you. Rob?
Thanks, Chair. Just on that, given payroll is not an insignificant part of financial management, just wonder where external auditor was in terms of considering the implications of a minimal assurance report on such a major part of the CA's financial systems.
Yeah, so obviously external audit look at the work of internal audit. We don't actually rely on the work of internal audit. We get our assurance from substantively testing payroll, so in that respect it wouldn't impact directly on the external audit, but we would take it into account when looking at the overall control environment things.
Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, if I come back, I know obviously you can't rely on Bron's work, but in the light of what the audit has identified, are you likely to do any sort of re-performance, or are your basic coverage of payroll assurance enough to?
Yeah, we can get our assurance from substantively testing payroll transactions that are within the account, so going back to records, so not looking at the controls sort of in place. So yeah, we can get our assurance elsewhere, so it wouldn't have a direct impact.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Dacre?
Thank you. So on page 10 with the key themes, since we're here to kind of test the working of internal audit as such, and not perhaps the specific workings that you yourself are auditing, it's concerning that, say, at number 4 and 5, you're talking about risk management, a recurring theme, as if you're not getting through, and then governance and oversight, audit recommendations consistently highlight need for clearer governance structures. And so, and then you've got the list of what management say are the blockers, and it's got to be a concern to the committee if audit isn't operating effectively because there's not the buy-in from the organisation to the work that you're doing, and you're just saying the same things over and over again. And I mean, in relation to that, I think it comes back into the next item, but there's the talk about the difficulty in getting responses from management, and that just seems wholly unsatisfactory as an organisation that's happening. You are, and it's at the worst possible time, I know, for everybody, because everything is growing and changing, but that just means it's all the more important that people are actually listening to audit and working with it. And I don't know what the organisation is doing to strengthen your arm, really, in that.
Okay, Ben, did you want to come back on that one?
More than happy to. So it is a major concern for us, as you would expect, and we are doing a significant amount in terms of tightening up the essentially how the organisation creates work streams, and ensuring that, particularly through bringing to the fore project and programme management arrangements that that at the outset set out very clear governance arrangements, very clear structures about who is doing what, very clear programme plan. So very much moving towards the process of having what are called project initiation documents and issuing clear mandates once we're satisfied that the governance arrangements are in place. So to make no mistake, this is of a concern to me and to the leadership of the organisation. As I said earlier, I don't think that everyone being very busy or pace is an excuse not to do those things. I think that it's core about good project and programme leadership.
Can I just come back on that? So I suppose the sort of follow on from it is that I would expect that were I here in, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months, a year's time, that I wouldn't be seeing those same problems being flagged up, because if we were, then the organisation is not doing what you have committed to it doing.
Thank you. So I think there's something in there about tracking again, isn't there, for this committee? Councillor Tate and then Dave.
Just on the management actions side of it, so there's 19 in there that are like overdue but with revised date not agreed, so it's going back to this. So on some of the audits, so the recommendations are not accepted, but there's only a couple, so I guess there's explanations behind that as to why not. But these actions that are overdue but a revised date not agreed, it then becomes a kind of not accepted, because if there's no fresh date put in, then are you really taking action on it?
Thanks. Is that Rob or Bron? Do you want to come back on that?
Oh, I'll step in quickly. We have got in the next agenda item, obviously, the report to go through. I think one of the big learning points that we have as a team been thinking about recently is the kind of awareness raising that is needed. So we've done a lot of work working with the senior leadership team and the directors, and I think the directors are all very on board. They get the importance of what we're doing. They are absolutely engaged with us. It's about that promulgating all the way through the business. So, you know, at that level, we get great engagement, but when we're actually doing the work, we get less great engagement. Is that a term that's appropriate? So I think there is an awareness piece for us, and our strategy is very focused on trying to make sure we're getting out, raising the actual understanding of what assurance is and what we're trying to do and what we're trying to achieve, and how the organisation needs that all to be working for the foundations to be strong. So we've got a massive piece in our strategy that we'll talk about at the workshop around doing that engagement, but we've already come out to, so I've been to one of Joe's service area sessions to talk about what is audit, what do we do, why do we do it, how do we do it. We've offered that to others. We've got about 3 more lined up in the near future. So you're not wrong in terms of, and Councillor Dacre's point about whether, you know, the worry that we're not getting the engagement that we need. I think a lot of it is a lack of awareness, and it's a lot of new people in the organisation that have come in. We need to do this as a rolling programme so that actually people understand what we're trying to do. There is also something, though, about coming back to directors, and I'm not wishing to put any of the directors on the spot, but it is about them taking that responsibility for making sure that they tell their teams and their heads of service to engage with audit, when they are asked to reply to draft reports, get your management actions back within the 2-week deadline. That we almost get an automatic response saying, can we have longer? Instead of, yeah, we'll get on. We're not asking you to have completed the actions. We're just asking you to agree what you're going to do, put your deadlines on them, and then motor on with it. So I think there is a sort of a just drip feeding that through. And somebody made the point about, I think Councillor Dacre, it was you, about risk management. We're going through a massive process of upskilling the organisation around risk management. So you're right, we need to not be in this position in 9-10 months' time. We need to see the results of all of that effort and work that is going in now to get people aware of what is required of them and why it's required. Why do we need strong foundations? Why do we need good control frameworks? So it's massively at the front of what we're trying to do as a team at the moment to raise the awareness in the business, as well as making sure we're doing our job in the best possible way we can, meeting the standards in full. So, yeah, does that answer? I think I picked off a few there, but please tell me if I didn't cover them.
Dave?
Thanks, yeah, and I understand the efforts that Ron and her team are making to get the right impact, to get the right engagement, and heard, Ben, what you said about the process side of things and get that in place. But I think, what's coming through here clearly is there's a need for some sort of communication potentially from yourself through the organisation, through your directorates, to say, look, we expect a better standard of engagement with internal audit, and to use the internal audit's resources effectively. We need that sort of engagement, and I'd expect to do some sort of response like that from the executive to make that point clear, because it comes through here in this section and the next section as well, section 7, when we get to the internal audit follow-up.
Ben?
So, believe it or not, we have done that already. And what we've also done is we've made it clear that where there are outstanding actions that aren't being addressed, or that the committee is rightly concerned about, or is likely to raise questions about, that the relevant officers are here in the room, and they are here in the room partly for the next item. So we will continue a process where we aim to identify specific issues where this is happening and address them, and we will change the culture of the organisation in a way that I think many people, as Bron said, are keen to do. But it's just about instilling the importance of this into their daily working process.
Thank you. I was going to suggest, and it sort of overlaps with the next agenda item, that this committee agrees principles against which we call in some of the officers where there's outstanding actions, where we're not happy with the response, etc., etc. And I was going to offer to try and put something together as a starter and share it with the committee, and then we could maybe shape it up together remotely. So if you're happy with that suggestion, I'll take that one away. Yeah, I'm seeing nods around the table. Okay, thank you. And Rob, I think you wanted to come in.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've got a couple of points. I won't stack the questions, so one at a time. Bron, just whether you could give us an update on the vacancy position.
So I have the audit manager role going to our job evaluation panel on the 6th of November. Hopefully that will sail through. And we'll go out to advert for that as soon after that as possible. And the apprentices, we're working with the two awarding bodies, SIPFA on the counter-fraud apprenticeship and the IIA on the internal audit apprenticeship, to make sure we bring them in at the right time to meet the next cohort of entrants, because we have to put them on a fixed term contract. We need to make sure we give them enough time to actually do their apprenticeships, so we can't recruit too early for those. But it's all in train. Very excited, just for the record.
Thanks, Bron. Chair. Yeah, just picking up on the stat that was 2 grant certifications. Just from experience, they can be quite challenging, and just whether there have been any issues you've found with data quality or timeliness that has enabled you to certify those grants. And again, whether there's learnings. I know it's not an area that you would qualify in normal audit terms, but there can be quite important learning from how services and finance coordinate and corral information that enables you to do the certification on time.
Yeah, and as always, you are spot on, because one of the grant certs that we just did was quite a big one. We were also doing an audit. Coincidentally, it was just about the timing of when we were asked to do the grant cert, and because we were looking at both sides of the coin, as it were, it did identify a number of areas. So we were actually minded, as a result of the grant certification work, to issue an audit memo to make those recommendations. And we've been working with Kate's finance team to just look at the pipeline of grant work and the understanding within the business of how important it is to identify where certification is required, whether that's mandatory or just a nice to have, so we know where we can actually be a bit, we don't have the capacity to do that, or actually we really do have to do that one. So there's quite a lot of work going on, and I think it does come on the back of having some more resource to do this. We've got some roles identified in the finance team, although I think you're still going out on some of those, possibly. But it does require us all to work together. It absolutely does need everyone to understand how their bit impacts the next bit, impacts the next bit. And that's partly why we issued that memo, just to make sure that there was that kind of be clear on the roles and responsibilities.
Councillor Dacre.
If I may, I'm on a roll, so I'll carry on. It was just picking up on the increased fraud, prevalence of fraud or suspected fraud within adult skills, and the extent to which or how you get assurance around their anti-fraud arrangements, because obviously we're divesting that responsibility to other providers, but what are the arrangements in that audit process to be satisfied about their anti-fraud and control arrangements?
So we do those third-party audits very much as a kind of an all-purpose audit. So we don't just look at exactly what they do in terms of the adult skills stuff. We do what we would do with any audit of an organisation per se. So we look at all the policies, we look to make sure that they have all of those counter-fraud policies in place, we look at what kind of monitoring they do, etc. It is an area, a market area that is a little bit rife with these issues, and we've noticed that particularly the adult skills fund side of things, which is the training, the kind of the more sort of stuff that we're familiar with and has been around for a while now, that is getting better and stronger. But the boot camps that were brought in to do those really quick sort of get people into jobs bit is more problematic. And we're trying to get all of the learning from the adult skills stuff transferred into the way they're setting up the funding agreements and the contracts on the boot camp side. So there has been an uptick, but that's because we did a lot more boot camp contracts. I think it's best will in the world. It's an area we are always going to have to be very mindful of the flags and what we need to be looking for. So the audit team that looks after adult skills regularly make referrals to our counter-fraud team, who will check it out, just to make sure that actually there's nothing more untoward. So we work very much in tandem between those two teams as well.
Okay, thank you. Can I move to Councillor Dacre?
Yeah, thank you. So I agree we should have some of the audits come to us. I just would ask that everybody tries really hard not to start doing the job of internal audit when we look at them, and we concentrate on the process and why isn't the process working and what are the difficulties in the process, and not into the minutiae of what is being audited. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll bear that in mind when I write the proposal. Thank you. Any other queries on that particular paper? Yeah, Councillor James.
Yes, this is probably a naive question. On page 13, so the agreed audit plan has got, I'm particularly interested in the home energy project, which I think was meant to start in the spring and doesn't look as if it's going to start until maybe the new year. So what does it mean when you have a draft report, scoping and field work, and what role can we have in that process, or where do we come in?
So those particular descriptors are very much to give you an idea of progress of the plan, rather than a particular role for committee in those actual descriptors themselves. So that will tell you where on the audit plan we kind of are with the process. So scoping is when we've usually done our planning stage by that point, and we're with the business agreeing what we're going to cover, what we're not going to cover, so that the actual scoping document for the review is quite clear. The fieldwork stage is a bit like it says on the tin. It's when we're actually in there doing the testing, looking at all the documentation, doing the interviews, etc. And draft report is when the auditors concluded their work, they've pulled it all together into what they consider to be the pertinent facts, etc. And they then feed that back to the business with the view of the business then checking for factual accuracy, making sure we haven't got something really, really badly wrong. And eventually, obviously, final report is when it hits the completed column with a nice tick and an audit opinion in the final column. Audit opinions are only issued for those audits that are assurance pieces. Where we do advisory work, we don't give an opinion, but we can still make formal recommendations for the organisation to address. Does that help? Have I answered the question?
Yeah, I think the trouble is that I was on scrutiny last year, and so I could ask more detailed questions about, say, the home energy project, you know, and why has it been delayed? So is that a question I'm allowed to ask?
So it's not actually been delayed. It has just been quite an intensive piece of work. So it has taken us longer than we would have liked to do it, but it is at the draft report stage now. So the audit work is effectively finished. What we're doing now is getting management actions agreed. Again, taking a bit longer than we would have liked, and I think that's a little bit of an indication of some of the themes that we highlighted with the delays that we're getting. You know, we are asking people to come back to us quite quickly with management actions, although I would say 2 weeks is ample time to say what you're going to do. So it is just about that understanding in the business that actually you need to do your bit when we've done our bit, so that we can actually move on to further assurances, further advice work, and deliver the whole of the audit plan, which is quite ambitious.
Okay, any further question? No. Okay. Any questions from anyone else on this paper? Or? No? Okay, so if we can please note that the matter has been considered and discussed. Bron, I have got a few presentational suggestions, so I'll just send those through to you outside of the meeting. Okay, so that moves us on to the related paper, which is agenda item 7, and that's for the committee to note updates on the outstanding audit queries. So again, I think if we take this as read, and unless there's anything you want to add to that, Bron, should we move straight on to questions?
Sorry, Chair, there was just one item. The PCI DSS action at, let me just work out where it is. On page 5 in the actual audit report, that first one has now closed. So just wanted to give the committee confidence that we have had the evidence through to support the closure of that, and just to make that point again, that we don't close the actions until we've seen the evidence. So that's sometimes why there's a bit of a delay between the business might think it's closed, but actually it's not closed until the auditor's confident that the evidence has been seen. But that one is definitely closed.
Thanks, Bron. Questions? David?
Yeah, thank you. And just to comment on this, the quality of this report's much better than last time round. I think now it's back in your hands, Bron. It's in much better shape. A few points though, we seem to have lost the owner in each risk. I think it would be useful to have understanding who the owner is, and there may be some timing on when the management updates were given. And then finally on the format, which is the use of the blue category in here, there's quite a few in here where if you read the management updates, I wouldn't say it was blue, I'd say it was more like red or amber, given slippage and potential slippage. There's quite a few places in here where we just need to be a bit tighter with that use of blue or red. But I think coming to sort of substantive points about the various open points, I mean, I'd start, I guess, with on page 45, the one below the PCI DSS, the vulnerability management. And it's clear that we've got an ongoing vulnerability here. Last time around we were told this was going to be completed by the end of August. Clearly hasn't been. It's clearly now seems to be an unopened standoff. Can somebody maybe explain what's going on there from the executive?
Thank you, David.
This has been delayed because of some competing demands and priorities to do with various projects which are delaying the server audit work. There's been some legacy systems that need decommissioning. There's been some ongoing work with Windows 11, which is a rollout, quite a significant rollout, and that has meant that the work that's required to complete that audit has been put back. We think that will be complete by the end of the calendar year. It will be complete by the end of the calendar year.
Thank you. Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just picking up on that, obviously, I don't know the full risk implications of this delay, but from what you've just said, somebody has made the priority of progressing projects at potentially the expense of cyber security and resilience. So it's I suppose understanding where that decision was made and whether everybody sort of really understood the implications of that. I can see it's a it's a competition for time and resource, but faced with, a glowing red and delays in addressing vulnerability, we're just delaying it more by choosing to spend your time on projects.
We are dealing with the most critical cyber risks. They are the ones that are taken priority, and they're the ones which this work has been slightly delayed by. All the servers are completely monitored and controlled. We're on top of the risks that are across the estate in terms of servers. We know precisely what is on every single server. They are being managed day in, day out. I don't believe that there's any significant risk as far as this particular work is concerned. We've prioritised the most acute risk to the organisation in terms of cyber by the prioritisation of the work I mentioned a moment ago.
Yeah, Rob, do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thank you for that. I suppose it highlights the importance of the narrative in this to de-concern us. If the head of IT is giving the sort of assurance and explanation, it'd be probably helpful to, in cases like this where there's a red issue, to make sure we understand the full context of the current position. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris and then Councillor Zaker.
Yeah, sorry, it's Jo. I'm sat in Chris's place.
Sorry, Jo.
No, that's fine. Just to add to that, absolutely, these are not in date, and that's something we've got to pick up in terms of a time lag. But I think it's important to mention here that as a result of following this process, it's actually generated a further deep dive. And that is part of also what we're doing. So I expect actually quite a lot more to come onto this register in the next month or two, because as a result of my going through these with the team, we want further work and further investigation and further independence. So I just wanted to give you some reassurance that it's actually put it further up the list rather than it going off the radar. So we're doing a deep dive, as Bron's aware, on 2 different areas here. So one is cyber, and then one is a bit further down where there's a series of projects that have been running behind what I've requested, and it's just been completed. Another special audit in that on that programme of work. So we need to make sure that that's reflected in here, to give you that reassurance. But I think from an operational perspective, as somebody who's actually trying to deliver this from that end, it's as a result of the embedding that we're trying to do that it's going to generate a bit more before it gets, and that's a positive thing in a strange kind of way. I just wanted to make that point that there will be more, and we've done 2 further deep dives as a result.
Thank you. Councillor Dacre.
Well, I think it's probably been said, but yes, the way it reads is that these applications, which are no longer supported by their creators, are having to be babysat by your staff. And it says in here they're going to remain operational till 2030, and that just seems absolutely absurd as a security risk, because you're just building in a layer of failure and risk. But I mean, I understand what you're saying, and I think it's no point in you answering me that really, because I think you've already answered it. But I do just think when you read it as somebody who doesn't know what's going on, it just looked really frightening.
Yeah, do you want to come back on that one?
Can I just mention that we are looking at ways of removing those applications while giving staff and officers the data they need. So there is ways of getting the data out of the application so it could be continued to use in a different, more safer environment. So the application will be removed and deleted.
Thank you. So maybe for next time we can have an enhanced report update on that one. That would be useful. I think we've got Councillor Homewood and then Rob.
Yeah, it was just a general point. It was sort of made earlier, it was just that when I looked through this, there seems to be a lot of blue in progress, but then when you read the commentary, the date seems soon, and the commentary doesn't suggest they're going to be completed. So I don't know whether in progress just seems to mean it hasn't met the due date yet. We don't actually know whether any progress necessarily has happened. So I know that's a tricky one because you can't confirm it's going to be complete before it's completed, and then trying to have a RAG status within a ongoing rate is probably too tricky. But I'm just kind of conscious that by the time we get to January, we might have a whole more pages of red.
Bron?
So I think you're absolutely right, and part of a conversation I was having before the meeting started was what more we can do as an audit function to flag those in a different way, so that you don't just get the management response, you also get an audit view of what that's saying, because we do chase recommendations every single month, and we have a tracker. We know what's been said up to this point. We share. We're certainly planning to open that up to the business so they can see what they said last month and the month before. And I think what we need to bring here is that audit opinion on whether that is on track actually, and whether in progress is an adequate reflection. It will create a little bit of tension to begin with, because I think we'll have differences of opinion as to what that is, but I think that is what you want us to do. You want us to give our professional opinion on whether things are in progress. So I think there's a bit more we could do to give you more to go at, as it were.
Just quickly, Chow, I was just going to say, I think something like that would be really useful in what you were referring to earlier in terms of where we might want to request people to come to, because if we know that there's something that isn't really being actioned or is of a significant concern, that will help us to prioritise that. So I think that would be really useful.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Rob?
Thanks, Chair. I might be a lone voice in this, but I just wonder whether it'd be useful for the committee to have a non-technical sort of briefing on the CA's arrangements for sort of cyber resilience and general information governance. It's sort of linked to the DPO's report as well, that because from my experience and perspective, it's a matter of when rather than if there are issues that arise, and so it's always, and for it, as it's such a huge issue for all organisations, for the committee to just perhaps understand a little bit more about the broader arrangements for cybersecurity. Some of the actions that you highlighted that weren't in this report, I think might be useful. Certainly for me would be useful to just understand it a little bit more.
I'm more than happy to share the deep dive as we go through that. I think that would be quite sensible. I think the only other thing to note is it's a confidential paper and it needs to not be shared publicly. And likewise, that's the same with our risks. But more than happy to actually share and give you some more detail on where we go with that. That's a good idea.
Thank you. I was slightly concerned about the reds against the health and safety audit recommendations. They seem to have been outstanding for a very long time, and I can see no good reason for that. I think health and safety really should be prioritised. So I'd welcome some feedback on that, please. Joe?
So two issues with a health and safety. One of them is primarily the asset audit that was going to be complete by September won't be complete until December. So as a result of that, those particular actions will need to wait until that asset audit's complete. There's an order to how they can be completed. The delay in the asset audit is also being picked up, and it's on the risk register. It's something as an organisation that we have been managing and dealing with. The second slight issue with these has been a sickness. So the person who's responsible. So we were having the conversation about what we would do temporarily, and that person has then just come back into work, but we had a 4-month absence that we've been trying to manage. So that person is now back, and that's why these will absolutely be picked up and managed. And then there is also, as part of business planning, which is yet to be formalised or agreed, but there's some additional resource in terms of that resilience for the organisation that we are have put forward as part of our business planning, and a head of facilities management, which will cover health and safety, has been agreed, and we're looking to recruit that and hopefully get a post out for that before Christmas. So there's quite a lot of activity to try and build in the resilience that we realise as a result of one person not being around, how tricky it was to actually cover some of those actions.
I suppose just following on from that, which committee would make the decision that a health and safety issue wasn't sufficient a priority to bring in interim resource to address it?
So from an operational perspective, that is something that we would, FRCC, I'm not sure the answer, to be honest, which committee we would report an interim. I'm looking at Kate to see if she would.
Ultimately, the appointment of resource sits with where it is budgeted and sits within our internal delegations, and ultimately sits with the head of pay service. For those, so it would be a request through where it is not within budget. Again, it comes through to head of pay service, so it wouldn't be a committee, it is a operational decision ultimately around resource.
Okay, I just wonder if that's a bit of a weakness that needs looking at, because I think to sit on a health and safety risk for this long is probably not very acceptable, I would suggest. So I'm not sure if that's something that can be taken away and looked at. Ben?
So just to echo what Kate and Joe have said, so this is a risk that we are very alive to. None of this is an excuse for the fact that this has remained red for too long, but there's a kind of sequencing of the condition surveys that are required in order to understand the states of the assets. This is in the context and light of the closure of Bedford Interchange, that we wanted to make sure that all of our other facilities, there were no hidden issues in there. That work is underway. Some work was completed, but some of it is taking longer. And then the follow through into the actual health and safety assessments that then follow from that. It is fair to say there's been a lot of work, but it's still running behind where we'd like it to be. And the decisions around, as Kate has said, the decisions around how we resource that and whether we needed to do more in that space. The accountability sits with the relevant director, but the kind of additional resource outside of budget sits with me.
Thank you. And the other one I'd like to bring up is the benefits realisation risk, which also sort of concerns me, that it's got red against it. I know the reds are around benefits realisation. However, if we can't be clear on the benefits, how does the organisation know it's working on the right things to start with, is sort of where my thinking was going. So I'm just wondering what's being done around ensuring that the benefits are quantified from the outset and aligned with strategic objectives. Dave?
We have done a lot of work in this area regarding benefits realisation. We have reviewed the benefits in terms of all the business cases and ensuring that there's a thread between the original business case and project documentation and closure reports and status reports. So over the last 2 weeks, we've made quite significant progress on at least one or possibly two of those items in the pack can be closed. Most of them are quite significantly progressed and will be closed within the next 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. So we'll look for the changes on the next report pack to reflect that. Thank you. Any other queries from anyone on that paper? No? Okay, thank you. So if we can note the committees discuss the updates on the actions. So agenda item 8, that's a standard agenda item asking members to note the update on the 24-25 external audit. which covers the approach to be taken, materiality, value for money arrangements, and the audit fees. So I think, Nicola, will you be talking to that one, please?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm presenting the Audit Strategy Memorandum for the year ended 31st of March 2025. I will take the report as read because it's quite a long report, but I just wanted to highlight a few key things. So as you can see from the report, we do intend to issue a disclaimed opinion in 24-25, which has been the case for the last 2 years. The issues impacting the combined authority are quite complex, so it would not be possible to rebuild assurance within 1 year. Issuing a disclaimed opinion will allow the authority to meet the backstop deadline, which is actually the 27th of February 2026. And although we don't intend completing a full audit, we will be doing some audit procedures, and they're set out on page 72. So just to reassure you, we are committed to rebuilding assurance and to enable a clean opinion to be issued, but this will take time. We need to understand the scale of the risk of material misstatement within the opening balances, because obviously we've not had an audit for the last couple of years. As mentioned, the combined authority, the issues are quite complex. So in 23-24, in the audit opinion, you may recall that there was a issue highlighted around some material discrepancies with the movement in reserves statement. Had the backstop not come into effect, there would probably have been a modified opinion on that basis. So we do need to understand what work has been done by the combined authority to address those issues. And there is a risk that the opening balance on the usable reserves is not materially accurate and then therefore takes more rebuilding. So a key element of determining the programme of work to rebuild assurance is understanding what the combined authority have done to address the issues. There has actually been quite a lack of sort of consistency and experience within the finance team, and there's not many people in post that have been in post for the last few years, so therefore your sort of corporate history sort of knowledge is quite sparse. So it's just understanding how the issues have been rectified, but we are committed to working with Kate and her team to rebuild assurance. So that's all I was going to say, but obviously we'll take any questions you've got.
Thank you. Can I just check? I think when the issue arose with the last set of accounts, some of the committee here today weren't part of the committee at that point. Would you welcome a brief summary of the challenges that were found last time, or are you comfortable that you've got enough understanding? No? You're okay? Yeah, everyone content? Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to questions. I think, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. I feel your pain as external auditors. I work with other councils going through this. I suppose from a committee point of view, understanding what you're not able to do and the implications for how we might get complementary assurance, because we're not going to get it directly from you. There's a limit to how much internal audit can step into this space, perhaps some, but obviously the onus then is on Kate to sort of give us additional assurances, as Gary did, as Damon did last year, to obviously fill the potential void that we have, because obviously there isn't the full external audit. So at some point, understanding exactly what you're not able to do and the implications of that on our assurances would be helpful, I think.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. And just to say, obviously, we've been very clear with Mazars that we are effectively open for audit. We are incredibly open to being audited, and we want this work done as quickly as possible, because we want to get this over with is the wrong type of word, but have that kind of full audit that allows us to effectively move forward with that kind of clean opinion. So we very much welcome the team coming in, but yeah, absolutely, we are 100% there. I'm less bothered about the backstop date, as long as that work continues after to do that. So that offer is very much there, and I've been very clear that this needs to be working towards a full clean audit opinion for 25-26. And I've set that kind of gauntlet down on there. In terms, I think kind of the external audit is always a sample-based approach. In terms of that, it is never giving complete assurance across there. It gives a form of assurance to you around our numbers and our backwards-looking numbers for that year, in kind of conjunction with the work that you will see from internal audit, work you'll see coming through other committees, and of course going through combined authority board. So I think that has given you the richest picture that there is in there. We have done a significant amount of work within the team. The team is on a very strong delivery path at the moment in terms of that. The people that we have brought in are incredibly dedicated and working through things very diligently at the moment. So we are really starting to see a real shift change, I think, in terms of that, particularly around the controls and seeing strengthening through there. So we are definitely on the right path, and I feel very comfortable with where we are now.
Sorry,
Thank
can
you,
I just
Nicola.
add to that? In terms of work we do, we may have moved away from the traditional audit timetable that a lot of you might be familiar with. So as we do work, we won't wait until a normal audit timetable. We will bring any matters to your attention as we find them and as would be appropriate. So I hope that gives a bit of assurance as well.
Thank you. Any other questions on that page? No, thank you. So if we can say it's been noted and move on to agenda item 9, and that's the Data Protection Officer report, which is looking at the management and assurance of data protection and the reports for note. This item contains the exempt item Appendix 1. So who's going to talk to this paper? Is it you, Nikki?
I'm going to be speaking
yeah,
to this.
thank you.
So members, this is the first time this data protection report, as I understand it, has been presented to you in this format. Happy for it to be taken and read. It really sets out the factual position in terms of the combined authorities' obligations under GDPR and Data Protection Act. Just pulling out some key themes, there is going to be some discussion around the risk register, but 3.2, it sets out the position regarding how data interact with cyber risk as well, which has been picked up by Rob already. We can talk about that further in the next paper if you so wish. But it really sets a picture of some sort of minor arrangements that extra work needs to be placed at, very specifically around records management and non-compliance. That's very much a legacy issue given the change in systems at this organisation. And we're working through that so that we can deal with the disposal of written documents and hard copy documents as well. That work is in train. The other area of improvement that's being considered as part of data protection and information is GDPR training. There is a requisite that we ensure that all staff are appropriately trained and have awareness on this, and that is being modelled through the help of human resources to ensure that we are getting full compliance in that as well. There's some information around statutory handling and also engagement around some of our complaints that have been closed that have gone to ICO, and also information around one that is ongoing, which relates to transparency and accountability, information that the requester considers that we may hold, which is with the ICO to consider. You'll notice that there's some reference to an ICO accountability framework. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this framework, but what I would propose is the framework is quite a complex piece of material, and I'm really keen for members to have something that they can engage with, that they understand fully. But when we've done some analysis against this framework, it sets out that there is one area that appears red for the organisation in relation to records of processing activity. But that very specific red is outside of the control of this organisation because it relates to legislative changes that are going through royal assent. So what I would propose is, so rather than providing information and graphs that don't materially make any add value, I should say, we will bring another report setting out where we are in terms of that data and the records management around that as well. And that I'm happy to take questions. I've got the data protection officer in the gallery as well to assist members if that would be of value.
Thank you. So I think if you could bring that back, that'd be useful, and probably address a couple of the queries I had in terms of where you are with some data protection matters. Has anyone any questions just on the cover paper, not Appendix 1? We'll close after these initial questions to take questions on the appendix.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose from a a governance perspective, I suppose it's understanding where DPO issues, information governance is considered within the framework of internal management sort of oversight, of whether you had an information governance board or something like that where there could be specific visibility of key arrangements for good information governance, but also on the cyber stuff as well, which obviously is probably a matter of when rather than if. So I'll stop with that and just with that question first.
Yeah, who wants to take that?
Yes, thank you. I'll take that, Chair. We don't have a specific group that is for an information governance group. However, as part of our internal boards, such as Performance Board and Corporate Board, in particular the Corporate Board does have within the terms of reference that a DPO report will be provided on an ad hoc basis. That meeting is, as far as I believe, chaired by Ben as the Chief Executive, so that direction of the more senior people within the organisation from an officer's perspective being aware of things from a data protection perspective does happen.
Okay, do you want to come back, Rob?
Yeah, please, Chair. It's interesting what you say there, because obviously you're the data protection officer, aren't you? I would have expected you to be presenting your report to that board, do you? In person?
No, I do, because this area of work sits under the Assistant Director, so under the scheme of delegation, I present that report with the assistance of the Data Protection Officer. But it is a collaborative approach, because clearly the Data Protection Officer is the expert in that field, but I'm intrinsically involved in this work because of the legal obligations that flow from that.
I just raised it obviously because the regulations sort of stipulate the very specific independence of the DPO and their ability to raise and speak, you know, almost like the head of internal audit. And obviously it's for that role as you know, this sort of statutory data protection officer has that access to management if that necessary. That's fine. Okay.
And just to provide you with assurance on that, so first of all, Nikki also holds the role, as well as being the Combined Authorities Monitor Officer, of the Senior Information Risk Owner. And secondly, from the experience of the past, or certainly the amount of time that I've been at this organisation, I've had those directors accessible when I've needed them. So there's been things that have been passed directly to Ben when we've needed to have that. So those lines are available, and there is a very strong recognition within this organisation of that statutory role that I hold, which is ultimately taken seriously.
Thank you. Councillor Homewood.
Yeah, I just had one specific question, then just a general comment. So the question I just had was about where you're talking about the risks. There's a reference to being breached for compliance around statutory requests like freedom of information, but then later in the packet kind of suggests that we're doing really well on FOI. So I just wondered why that was like a specific risk that's called out, because it seemed like, I don't know if it's just because we get a lot of them, but...
Well, to be completely clear with you, Councillor, is we have identified it as being a challenge regarding the lack of resource, for which we have a plan in place to be able to recruit to. What I would say on that is the team will always prioritise those statutory requests, so we are aware of it. We've added it to us local risk register, so then we can prospectively stop and prospectively mitigate against any potential breaches that may occur. So it's a good thing that it's addressed as both a risk and we're performing well, because what we're trying to do is say it is a risk currently, but we want it to stay as a risk. We don't want it to become an issue further down the line, so that's the reason that we've highlighted that.
Okay. The other thing I was just going to comment, because you mentioned this was the first time this has come here, I was just going to say that just from my experience in council, it might be an idea of having something a bit like some of the similar to the other reports, like a dashboard or something, because there is things, and I don't know whether it's just because it's less relevant at a combined authority, but there is things that are not in here, like, you know, data privacy impact assessments, data breaches, subject access requests, stuff like that, which might be good for us to be able to track and see whether we're hitting timescales, whether we have any issues around those.
Actually, you make a really good point. This has actually been prepared, but it needs to be edited so that it's user-friendly. So like the framework, we want to present it in a fashion to you as a committee so that it hits the right points. But we'll certainly make sure that that's developed and presented to you. I should say finalised and presented to you for the next cycle at which this report is presented.
Thank you. Any further questions on the cover paper? If not, we'll move to closed session. Yes, Councillor Dacre.
Just very quickly, trivial question, page 95. Combined authority risk LG 71 is identified to mitigate against 5.2.3. I don't know where 5.2.3 is.
That is a typo, councillor. So very well spotted. It relates to the 3.3.3. 3.2.3, sorry. That's further up in the page. Yes, my apologies for my oversight on that.
That's okay. We'll make a note of it and make sure it's noted. Thank you. So before we close, just to reconfirm that we'll receive the ICO framework and some metrics next meeting. Lovely. So can we just move to closed session, please, for the Appendix 1? Now, and we just need to now note formally that agenda item 9 has been considered. Okay. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item 10, and that again is a standing agenda item on risk management. And this paper has got an exempt item, which is Appendix 8. So the paper is very detailed, and it's got plans for embedding risk outlined in the documents that we've been sent. So, Nikki, are you talking to the paper for this
Chair.
one, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, members, this is a standing item on your agenda. As you know, this organisation is now embedding phase of risk management and assessment and implementation. We're currently looking to ensure that we've got a robust framework in place that has got a top-down approach. And we do this because of a number of issues around our legal obligations and also around CIFPA and SOLIS guidance in discharging particular statutory duties around risk, given the number of projects that we have underway. So as you can see, there's a number of appendices that are attached to this paper alongside the risk registers. There are some matters that need to be considered in private, Chair, as well. So I'll take it in two parts. As you can see, there's a lot of information there in terms of how we've approached risk as an organisation. Now, this is a very new approach, and it is in the embedding stage, and we are undertaking a number of workshops, both with members. There was one last Friday, and now it's sort of transitioning to officers, those ones that are risk sponsors, those officers that work on the projects themselves, but also the leadership team as well, given the important role that directors play in assessing risk and making sure that it's properly managed. Now, throughout this paper, you'll see there is a really there's a stepping approach in how we look at risk as an organisation, and I'm happy to move to the corporate risks first, of which you'll see at 3.5 is set out, and these reports and statuses are as of September 25, so they're fairly recent. And before we get to that, there are a number of key takeaway appendices on the risk management strategy, on the policy itself, and this is designed for officers to utilise when they are incorporating risk into their projects, and making sure they're having the right conversations, understanding that risk is really an approach that we need to take as an organisation through the cycle of a project or scheme, and not being afraid to consider the risk appetite against what the outcomes are and the objectives are of the organisation as well. I'm happy to talk to the appendices that were created by the risk manager, but equally I'm happy to go to the corporate risk register as well. If members have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thanks, Nikki. There's a huge amount of work gone on in terms of shaping this over the last month. I think the committee really appreciates that and recognises the efforts that have been made to get this right. I suppose one of my questions is, what's the measure of success? How does this committee know that the new measures that are being put in place really are being embedded and working?
I think it's about time, if I'm very, very honest with you. Now, we've got a lot of controls in place from the project sponsor through to the leadership team. The leadership team, it's seen at performance board, it's seen at corporate board, it's brought here. It's at various iterations, it's brought to various leadership boards for that scrutiny and management as well. And how we manage it, I think we've got to consider the embedding of this risk approach for the organisation first and foremost. And as we move along that process, we'll be able to look back and manage and see whether they've been successful, whether we properly treated that risk accordingly to the appetite that we've set. And then we can look back and continuously do an audit on the risk itself and make sure that it's measurable, and we report to you and the other forums as well, so that we're ready to ensure that risk is the language that we speak as an organisation, and something that we're not afraid of, that we've got an appetite for.
Thank you. So is there a role for Bronze team in this in terms of assuring?
There will be.
So we do an annual audit of risk management, and absolutely have it on the plan for this year, but we will do it right at the end of the year so that it's given it as much time to embed as possible.
Thanks, Bron. Questions from anyone else? If we have Councillor Homewood, then Ron.
Just a quick one, I might be just missing it somewhere. You know, in these different documents, where's the actual section that explains to somebody what matrix they're supposed to use to assess risk? So, and it's referenced like likelihood and impact of risk. Is that within these documents?
Yeah, it is set in these documents, but what I would say is, as part of the workshops, we're going through these with officers so that they can utilise and pick up the right key skills document to make sure they're applying the right matrices to their projects themselves.
Okay.
So it is within this suite of documents.
Is the actual matrix in there, is it? I just didn't
Matrix
see it,
is, as I understand it,
I was missing it.
there was one. It was at the end, I think.
Okay. I was only thinking it for two reasons. One was
Sure.
because obviously if I was somebody working in the combined authority, I might want to, that's something I might need access to understand how I go about assessing my level of risk, and also from us to understand if we have an impact and likelihood matrix, what are our kind of thresholds of risk, but I'm not sure which document
Yeah,
is it.
I think I understand what you're referring to. I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to find out where the risks lie first, and then do an assessment of the risk in accordance with financial viabilities and financial risks as well. And if you look at page 3 in Appendix 4, which relates to risk placement framework, that assists the officers in how they place that risk within the register. But we're building a reporting measure as well for officers as well. Bronwyn, can you assist?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, these are the simplified takeaways. There is a whole suite of risk documentation on a hub on our intranet that officers can access, and that has all of the computations for risk assessment, the likelihood, the maturity, etc. So it is all there. It's just we tried to do something that was a little bit more readable, a little bit more so you've got a quick takeaway, a simplified version. So, but all of that other stuff is there.
Thank you. I think we saw some of that last time as well, didn't we? Yeah, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. The point you made about what the success looked like for us, I think there's two things. One, a glowing report from Bronwyn at some point when there is if there is such a thing, about the review of risk management, and then from a practical point of view, I think seeing the whites of a risk owner's eyes to walk through how they have actually used the framework and affected the risk, the issue, the concern in a positive way, which obviously will be down the line.
Yeah,
so,
in time.
in 9, 12 months or whatever is appropriate for us to see and feel it.
Yeah, absolutely. And this was picked up in the workshops as well, about giving real life examples of projects that we've held and going through that sort of cycle of risk assessment. So I think that would add value to this process as well.
Thank you. So maybe we could schedule that along with Bronwyn's risk reports on our plan. To come back on the forward plan. Any other questions on that before we move to closed session? Yeah, David.
Just looking at the overall picture on page 132, which is the sort of the corporate risk register. Our risk appetite statement has no low or minimalist areas in it. They're all moderate, high, very high kind of risk appetite. So therefore, when I look at the target risk rating column, it's got a couple of lows in it on mass transit and protective security, and I don't see any high or very highs on there. I can't quite square the two.
I think these particular projects are currently under review at the moment in terms of they've been reviewed recently. So I take your point, and then when this is presented at the next cycle, we'll make sure that information is provided to you.
So just to be clear though, so for this to reflect the risk appetite statement that we've approved, we would expect that column to include really only moderates, highs and very highs for the target risk we're planning to take in all these areas. Is that right?
Generally speaking, yes, but the risk owners are looking at whether that risk appetite is properly being aligned with what the project status is at the moment.
Okay, does that answer your question, David? Yeah, okay, thank you. Any other questions on that? No, so if we move to closed session. Thank you. Okay, thank you. So just to close agenda item 10, and just to make a note that the committee has considered the report. And the final agenda item is agenda item 11, and that's a compliance dashboard, which is again for the committee to note the performance of directorates and the direction of travel for the combined authority as an organisation. So, Nikki, is this back to you again?
This is my final report for members. This is a compliance dashboard paper, and it's split in two parts. If you look at the paper itself, it talks about the Q1 revenue position. This is for information for members. I'm sure that you may have seen this information already, but it relates to the fact that we are continuing a balanced position until the end of the position of Q1, and there are that is a consequence after transfers have taken place. And then it moves to these dashboards which are appended to the report. These dashboards are set out per directorate for ease. And during the pre-meeting there was a bit of introduction to these dashboards and some socialisation around what they mean in practice. And there are some points of improvement to these dashboards that officers are going to take away. But I'm happy to speak to the content of these. Also got the data protection officer in the back that can assist with any questions that might arise from the information on corporate risk, which we've discussed all the way through the 3 reports, and any other matters in relation to commercial committees, DTS or health and safety.
thank you. Any questions from any members? Yeah, Councillor Homewood.
Not really a question, but just apologies because I was asking basically for this. I was talking about this, which was actually in a different item. So sorry, I missed, forgotten to see that. So yeah, that was the kind of thing that I was talking about in terms of the data information governance. That's useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. One of my questions was why freedom of information requests don't appear to be being closed on time
On the
dashboard.
I think for this particular pack, it was because there was a data protection report, but we can certainly add that to the compliance dashboard for next time.
Any other queries from anybody on this, Rob?
Thanks, Chair. It was on page 159. I was just sort of amazed at the low level of sickness absence. That seems extraordinarily low for any organisation, never mind one under significant stress and strain. Current year 1.6%. Is that what it's telling me? At the top of
That's
that?
right. That's how I'd interpret it.
That seems extraordinarily low. I mean, it's great if that's true.
I mean, we are a smaller organisation
Yeah.
compared to, if you're benchmarking the matrix on that, it is a smaller organisation. So that would correspond with the number of employees, I've been told.
Are you sure?
That's what I've been told from the data protection officer
Behind
who
you,
has
fine.
compiled this dashboard. Then
I'll defer to the quality of the data. It feels low to me too.
Maybe one just to have a check on now
I can
it's
certainly
been
recheck
raised.
that. Rob.
Okay, thank you. Any other queries on this? No? Okay, thank you. So if we can... oh, sorry. Councillor Dacre.
Thanks. It was just really to make it clear for the benefit of anybody who's watching it that it's not that we were incurious or don't have any interest in this topic, it's that we did have a workshop beforehand when I think some of the questions that might have been asked in the meeting had already been asked, just about the nature of the dashboard and how it presented and things like along those lines.
Thank you, Councillor Darkett. But for the purpose of clarification, that's entirely correct. There was a workshop, but that wasn't to talk about the specific content, but how it's presented. And officers will take that away and present it in a more useful fashion for next time.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no more comments, we'll close that item as noted. And that brings us to the end of this meeting. The next meeting is on the 30th of January 2026, can you believe? So happy Christmas, everybody. Thank you very much.